Hello everyone. Today I've prepared a Blitz game played between the 8th World Champion, Mikhail Tal, and the 12th World Champion, Anatoly Karpov. A real clash of two champions with sacrifices of two rooks. The game was played in 1987. Enjoy! Mikhail Tal opens the game with e4, immediately staking a claim in the center. Anatoly Karpov responds with c6, signaling the Kurokin defense and preparing the central thrust d5. Tal follows up with c4, and we are now in the Panov attack, one of the sharpest and most aggressive continuations against the Kurokin. The idea for white is clear. After d5, which Karpov indeed plays, the center is challenged. White captures on d5, and after the exchanges, we see four pawns coming off the board. The result is a typical structure with an isolated d-pawn for white slightly weak, but in return it grants space and dynamic piece activity. Karpov develops his kingside knight to f6, intending to recapture on d5 with the knight, since taking with the queen would allow white to play nc3 with tempo. Tal brings out his knight to c3, and after the exchange on d5, he develops his kingside knight to f3, giving black the option, if they wish, to capture on c3. The 12th World Champion, well aware of Mikhail Tal's sharp attacking style, decides to trade of knights with an xc3. Of course, white gains a strong pawn center after d4, but one pair of knights has already been exchanged. Black replies with g6, planning to fianchetto the bishop along the long dark-squared diagonal. White consolidates the center with d4 and now has the option to bring out the light-squared bishop and castle. Castling tucks the king away into what is, for now, a safe haven. White also castles without losing time. Black develops the knight to c6, and although white has the central pawn duo, black's bishop on g7 exerts constant pressure, eyeing the pawns from afar. Tal brings his rook to the open file with re1, and Karpov responds symmetrically with re8. The idea is clear. Black is preparing the central break, e5, striking at white's pawn structure. But Tal develops his last minor piece with bg5, pinning the pawn on e7 against the queen on d8. Now, e5 is no longer simple. Black also has to decide what to do with the bishop on c8. So Karpov places his bishop on e6. Another logical option would have been bg4, pinning the knight on f3 and preparing e5 once the queen moves away. But in the game, Karpov plays b6, intending to reroute the bishop onto the long white diagonal later. And here comes the shocker. It seems Karpov momentarily forgot who he was facing. Against Mikhail Tal, such slow maneuvering is dangerous. Without hesitation, Tal sacrifices the exchange Rex 6. Black recaptures, but now white has the two bishops and domination over the light squares. Tal's bishop immediately springs to c4, targeting the weakness on e6. Black defends with qd6, centralizing the queen and shielding the pawn. White intensifies the pressure with key 2, stacking up against the e-file. Karpov retreats his knight to d8, defending the pawn once more, but Tal doubles rooks with re1. Despite all these defenders, the e6 pawn remains a long-term target. Black simply doesn't have enough defenders for the pawn on e6, and moving the king to defend it is absolutely undesirable. So, they bring their last inactive piece into play. Rac8, eyeing white's c-pawn and bishop. But here, white must remember the deeper point of the exchange sacrifice. It's not about material, it's about the attack on the black king. In this position, white's main task is to remember their strategic goal. By sacrificing the rook on e6 for the bishop, white has gained tremendous initiative along with full control of the light squares. Simply grabbing the bishop on e6 and exchanging pieces would be unprofitable. After multiple trades, black would capture on c3, and white would simply be left down the exchange with only a knight for a rook. That position would be losing for white. Therefore, Mikhail Tal's strategic idea is crystal clear. He must attack, and attack the black king. And the best way to do this is with the move, and 2, rerouting the knight toward the center and the king's side. Black replies with kh8, stepping out of the X-ray pressure against the pawn on e6. The white knight jumps to e4, attacking the queen. Black retreats the queen, also threatening the bishop on c4. Tal calmly withdraws the bishop to b3, and now black tries to generate counterplay. They strike in the center with e5, attempting to break apart white's pawn structure. For white, the key here is not to fall into materialism, not to waste time defending the pawn on d4, which is under double attack. White must stay true to his plan, and that's exactly what Tal does. He pushes h4, aiming to rip open black's kingside shelter. Black greedily captures the pawn on d4, but Tal continues undeterred with h5, marching his pawn straight toward the black king. And here Karpov begins to apply pressure. He takes the pawn on h5, but it should have been qb6. Would you have found such moves? Tal's move on h5 is also a little inaccurate, but he plays like a human being. He takes on h5 with his queen q5. The best move here, of course, would be the rather superhuman nf6. At least, it is extremely difficult to find such a move in Blitz. The point is that this knight cannot be taken. If black takes the knight with the pawn, it's mate in two. If they capture with the bishop, white simply wins a rook. And if black avoids capturing altogether and tries to defend against the attack, then white has the stunning sacrifice on f7, giving up the knight to completely shatter black's kingside defenses. After the knight is taken, white delivers a beautiful finish qxh5 plus, the bishop interposes, and then comes qxh6, checkmate. Tal captures on h5 with his queen, attacking the rook on e8. The rook is forced to retreat f8, bringing the rook into the defense along the f-file. But now comes bc2, suddenly the white bishop takes on an active attacking role and discovered checks begin to loom. Black is forced to defend with qe5, centralizing the queen. This move ties white down. The bishop can't move because the queen on h5 would hang, and the knight can't move either, as the rook on e1 would fall with check. But Tal is unfazed. He plays ng3, sacrificing his second rook, this time a clean rook sacrifice. The idea to distract the black queen from defending the king. And in fact, black has no real choice here. The queen has nowhere to retreat while staying close to the king's side. The beauty of ng3 is that it opens the diagonal for white's light-squared bishop, threatening k7. Mate in 1 with qh7 is still hanging. At this point, there was only one salvation, the precise defensive move bh6, sacrificing the bishop. If white takes with the bishop, then rf7 holds everything together. The rook is protected by the knight on d8, covering the 7th rank and guarding the pawn on h7. If white takes with the queen, again rf7 defends h7, and white's attack fizzles out due to lack of material. But in the actual game, Karpov didn't find this. Instead, he played the very human move a6, trying to create luft and block the mating net. But now Tal strikes with bxa6. The black king is forced to run, since capturing the bishop would again lead to a quick mate. And that's how the checkmate was delivered. With this breathtaking attack, the 8th world champion, Mikhail Tal, defeated the 12th world champion, Anatoly Karpov. If you enjoyed this masterpiece, don't forget to like the video. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching.